These events occurred 2 summers ago in the Grand Teton area. My boyfriend at the time, now husband, let's call him H, was an avid outdoorsman and also served in the military. I was an ecology major and wanted to spend more time outdoors, so he decided to take me on my first backpack, just the 2 of us. For those who aren't familiar, the Grand Tetons are well known for their wildlife, specifically grizzly bears. My only experience with bears up to this point was watching a little black bear cross the road from the safety of my car. Seeing grizzly country signs around every corner wasn't doing much to calm my nerves. The first incident. My boyfriend looked like Indiana Jones, machete hanging from his belt, large knives attached to each side of his pack, bear spray strapped to his waist. You get the picture. The beginning of our 25-mile journey was all uphill. When in bear country, you're supposed to make noise as to not startle the wildlife by accidentally sneaking up on it. As you can imagine, going up a steep hill while carrying a 40-pound pack makes it difficult to make conversation. We were an hour in, and almost at the top of the ascent. I noticed that the woods had gone completely silent, save for the rushing stream that was to our left of the trail. Silent woods are never a good sign. This usually indicates predators nearby. At this point, I was in front of my boyfriend, and we were about to crest the hill. For the past 20 minutes, we had not said a word to each other, having been too tired to speak. We noticed the silence at the same time, and gave each other knowing glances. I came up over the top of the hill, and immediately froze. Sitting not 10 feet in front of me, in the middle of the trail, was a grizzly bear. My husband wasn't aware yet, as he was behind me, so I did the first thing that I could think of. While still in my frozen stance, I managed to take my arm and started flinging it wildly behind me, trying to get my husband's attention. I was too terrified to speak. The bear went from sitting to all fours, not looking away from us once. H quickly swung me around so that I was behind him, and he just started yelling. Being in the military, he knows how to yell, but the grizzly wasn't quite fazed, as it started to walk slowly towards us. At this point, I was on the verge of passing out from terror. The bear was about 5 feet in front of us when we heard a loud crack, coming from the woods to our right. The bear heard it too, and he bolted towards the stream. A second crack boomed again, this time much closer than before. H said, "It's probably just some falling branches," but we both knew that wasn't the case. At this point, we were walking quickly up the trail in an attempt to create some distance from the grizzly bear and those strange noises. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up, and at that same moment, H stopped moving in front of me. He turned around to look at me, and I turned to look behind me. To this day, we are not sure what we saw. Back where we were standing was a large, black or brown mass. It looked to be 3 times bigger than the already large grizzly that we had just seen a few moments before. Its back was facing us, and then it stood on its back legs. It looked similar to a bear, but something about the shape was just off. At this point, it was probably stupid to run away, but that is exactly what we did. We were aware of heavy footsteps behind us, but neither of us looked back. The footsteps eventually faded. At this point, I was a mess. H was doing his best to console me. "Honey, this is extremely unusual. The bears usually stay away from humans. We're going to be okay. I'm sure that it won't happen again." That was enough to convince me to continue on the backpack. Not another hour later though, we had reached a clearing where we decided to take a rest and eat a snack. About a minute after we sat down, I noticed bushes moving in a line towards the clearing, towards us. Out of the brush comes this adolescent grizzly. He looks just as spooked as I'm sure we did, but he came straight for us. H, being the crazy nut that he is, decided to charge back at the bear while screaming, "Bear spray at the ready." That did the trick and the bear ran off. All I could think was, just my luck. But that wasn't even close to what happened the second night. Before we began our backpack, we had to let the ranger station know which trails or route we plan to take. With this information, they usually send a ranger on horseback at some point during the backpack to check on you to make sure that everything is okay. There were not many approved trails left for us to choose from, and it was just our luck that they were the most difficult. Apparently over the 3 days that we were on those trails, we had been the only hikers. We didn't see a single other person once we were en route. Anyhow, I guess we missed the ranger who came to check on us. We had been following hoof prints the entire second day, and we hadn't seen any the day before. I had some foot problems, so we spent valuable daylight trying to adjust my boot, laces, and socks to compensate for the pain. When we started on the trail again, we had maybe an hour or two left of daylight, and in the woods, it gets dark fast. I was exhausted, and it was now dark out, and H was the only one with a working headlamp, as mine wouldn't even turn on for some reason. We needed to find somewhere to set up camp, and we still needed to eat. It was freezing and the wind was blowing. It was creating a howling sound as it rushed through the trees, which made it difficult to hear or discern any other sounds coming from the woods. After another an hour of hiking through the dark, we found a clearing. Well, it was more like a bowl. It looked to be about 200 meters in diameter, with the sides being 10 meters down from the trail to the bottom of the clearing. This place was strange and we both felt it, though he didn't tell me how freaked out he was till after we had left. There was no moonlight, so all we had was the illumination from his headlamp, our small camp stove, and the flashlight that I had fished from my pack. Half of the trees were dead or fallen, just in the bowl. The vegetation everywhere else was very dense. To help alleviate my anxiousness, he started playing Ninja Sex Party out of his portable speaker. This didn't help much, as it just echoed off the trees, creating a dissonance of sounds. He also thought that it would ward off any predators nearby. This is when we knew our anxiousness wasn't paranoia. The silence was back. There hadn't been a single bird chirp since we had arrived at the clearing. It also may have to do with the obnoxious music, but because of our previous experience, we decided to turn off the music and head into the tent. Also, it was freezing. As soon as we were situated in our sleeping bags, we heard deep cracks and thuds echoing from beyond the tree line. Falling trees, maybe. There had been a lot of wildfires and very little rain this season. And then a thud. We both froze. That sound wasn't an echo. It came from inside the clearing. Definitely not a fallen tree. And then the thud again. It came from right outside our tent. We both stopped breathing. H's hand found mine and we clung to each other, paralyzed. Something dragged across the outside of our tent, making an indent as it went along. It was thin, almost like a finger. "What is it?" I whispered, shaking. "I don't know. It shouldn't be a person. We're the only ones on this side of the mountain." I was trying my hardest to stifle sobs, trying to listen to what was outside. I could hear steps, but I couldn't decipher what it was. The steps stopped, and then the whole side of the tent was slowly pushed inwards. At this point, whatever was outside knew that we were inside, so I shined my flashlight at the side of the tent. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was the shape of a human face pressed into the tent wall. I could make out the nose and an open mouth. Each time they breathed, it made the tent around their mouth billow in and out. H said, "Forget that," and he pulled out a Glock from a sleeping bag. He cocked it, and the sound shattered the silence. The face pulled back, and we heard fast footsteps heading towards the edge of the clearing. We didn't leave the tent until the sun was shining the next morning. The first thing we noticed was the smell of urine. We came out of the tent and we looked around. Whoever it was had peed on our coals that we had left in the fire, leaving a disgusting stench of evaporated pee. Footprints surrounded our tent, circling around multiple times. Muddy handprints decorated the outside of our tent. We think it was mud anyway. Wildlife is not the most dangerous thing in the backcountry. This happened last year in Virginia, and is also the reason that I never backpack alone anymore. I was taking summer courses at the time, and we ended up with a 3-day weekend in June, so I thought it was a great time to go explore some of the Virginian wilderness after all. I did a Google search and found a state park with a trail that looked nice, and I let my roommate and family know that the trail I would be going on. When I got close to the park area, I saw a little outdoor shop where people hiking the Appalachian Trail stopped. I went in to grab a map of the area just in case that I got lost. As I was talking to the owner, he mentioned a trail that's not well known that has a pretty cool waterfall and a swimming hole. This piqued my interest, so I had him show me on the map. It took me outside of the state park, but he said it was a great place to go. I paid for the map and I thanked the owner. I texted my roommate and my parents about the new trail, and I parked my car and I set off on my adventure. I should note that the waterfall was going to be the side trip of my journey. I was planning 3 days and 2 nights. I started on part of the Appalachian Trail, and it was pretty packed with people and some of them were really fun to talk to. As expected, I got further and further from the main trails and I saw less and less people. Around early afternoon, 3 miles from my destination, I noticed that it was unnaturally silent. No birds, no bugs, not even wind, and I had a feeling of being watched. I shook it off as me overanalyzing the situation. I got to the waterfall and it wasn't too spectacular, but it was cool to look at. Plus it had a good sized area to swim in, so naturally, I stripped down to my skivvies and I took a dip. It was pretty refreshing. As I was getting my clothes back on, I started whistling to myself. But that's when I heard something whistle the same tune back. I thought it was just a bird copying me, so I went back and forth with it, and it would repeat whatever I whistled. I thought it was pretty neat. As I was setting up camp, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was being watched again. Like I would get goosebumps and my hairs would stand up. As night fell, I built a small fire and I lit my jet boil to make dinner. As I did this, I became hyper aware that again, there was no sound, just deafening silence. Some part of my brain was telling me that I was not safe and I needed to leave. But I ignored it and I crawled into my tent with my flashlight and a book. I went to sleep without incident. When I woke up the next morning, my sight was trashed. My camp stool was nowhere to be found. My bear bag with my food was cut down, and the contents were thrown across the site. My first thought was a crafty animal chewed through the rope and got to the bag. But I looked at the rope and it was cut with something very sharp. Plus, none of the food was even touched. I also noticed bear footprints all around my campsite. Keep in mind, I'm at least 6 to 8 miles from the road. As I was looking at the mess, I heard a branch snap off in the distance and I turned to look in that direction. I saw nothing, but I heard that whistling again. My whistle from yesterday. But it sounded different, more sinister. It made my hair stand up on end. And this is when I listened to my instincts and I got the heck out of there. It sounded like it was a little off in the distance, so I packed up my camp as fast as I could. The whistling got closer as I finished stuffing that tent into my bag. I didn't bother with putting anything away properly. The whistling was incessant and sounded like it was coming from all directions. I got fed up with it, so I stood up and I yelled into the woods, "Shut up, and what the heck do you want?" It stopped whistling, and it was quiet for a moment, and then it repeated what I said in my voice. It sounded just like me but distorted, like it came from an old TV. After I heard this, I immediately threw my pack on and I ran the direction that I came. I heard it moving just behind me fast, switching between the whistle and my voice. It felt like it was toying with me, not coming too close but not being too far. Eventually, it sounded like it got further and further away from me, and then it stopped suddenly. When it stopped, I stopped and turned around. I wish I didn't because I heard the most bone-chilling screech ever coming from right next to me. And that's when I started running again. I didn't look, I only ran. Less than half a mile, I ran into a couple that was also backpacking. They saw the look of terror in my face and asked if that was me that screamed, and asked if I was okay. I told them about what happened and they decided not to go down where I just came from. We moved to a more populated trail as quickly as we could. As soon as I got back in my car, I drove to one of the park ranger stations and reported what had happened. Since the site was off park grounds, they told me it wasn't in their jurisdiction but they would send a ranger to investigate. The ranger station's parking lot run right up to the woods, and when I was getting into my Jeep, I heard that same tune coming from the woods just in front of me. I never drove so fast in my life. When I told my roommate why I was back after only one night, all he said was, "Bro, I'm never going camping with you." Last summer, a good friend and I embarked on a backpacking trip through the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. As fairly experienced day hikers, we felt comfortable in the Whites for our inaugural overnight trip. While planning, my buddy Ellis figured that we could hike to a backcountry campsite to make our first wilderness night a little more fun. I wasn't going to disagree. Beautiful views, historic trails, and protected night in the dry river wilderness. I was stoked to say the least. Before any hiking trip, I do a little internet search of the trails or shelters that we will be coming across. Throughout the mid to late 1900s, there were a series of these lean-to ups and downs to dry river wilderness, meant for backpackers or through hikers really looking to escape the crowds in more popular areas of the forest. Though as time went on and the Forest Service had other more pressing matters, many of these shelters were dismantled, except Dry River Shelter No. 3, the last remaining shelter in this wilderness zone. On the morning of our hike, I met Ellis at the trailhead and we set off. The sky was overcast, bringing with it a dense fog throughout the forest. The weather left us with nearly no visibility, so there went our stunning views. At least the trail consisted of prime, technical New England rock scrambling alongside the Ammonoosuc River. Ellis and I made it to the Presidential Ridge, stopping by the Lake of the Clouds. The hut was filled with day hikers, backpackers, and through hikers all socializing together. We were even rewarded with some sun, and a brief glimpse of the dry river valley on the summit of Mountain Moreau, before the fog rolled back in. With dwindling views and a stiff wind, Alice and I hustled below the tree line, down to the Dry River Shelter No. 3, our home for the night. Once we dropped off the ridge into the valley, we entered the wilderness zone where rangers patrolled sparingly. Time to really be alone in the wild. As we trekked into the wilderness, all signs of civilization disappeared, and the trail was densely overgrown. Although it had been raining all week, there were no footprints in the mud either. At least we would have some relaxing isolation, I figured. After about an hour or so of descending, Ellis spotted the lean-to just as our legs were asking for relief. A gorgeous old timber structure with a well-used fire pit alongside a cold mountain river. Pristine camping. As we settled in and explored the site, I found a small, bound notebook nestled into the corner of the structure. On the cover, someone wrote, "Dry River Shelter No. 3. Out of curiosity, I opened it, but found nothing more than a lone, man name scribbled onto the first page and a date. Just your standard camping log. Oddly though, the man signed the book the previous day. We saw no footprints or signs of human or even animal disturbance in the trails or here at the shelter. Rain could wash away tracks, but not all signs of animal life. Something felt off to me. I showed it to Ellis, who found it curious, but thought nothing more of the single name. He convinced me that the man was probably a hiking veteran and a professional at L&T. I bought into Ellis's thoughts on the situation to ease my mind. As the sun set, we started a roaring fire alongside the riverbank. Ellis commented on how quiet the location was, having not seen another soul beyond the chirp of birds since leaving the Crawford path. The silence was eerie, but we figured that city life desensitized us to the wild. The sun was setting in, we grew tired with the darkness. Ellis took the lean-to, and I spent the night in my tent. Sleep came quickly after hiking 8 miles with 20 pounds on my back, but this didn't last for long. A brutally sharp slapping noise woke me up. The only thing I could compare the noise to would be someone swinging a 2x4 into a tree, or snapping a thick branch. I figured it was a bear searching for our food bag, hanging in a tree some 20 to 50 yards away. Nothing out of the ordinary for New Hampshire. Sleep overtook me once again, and I remember waking up to the sun rising over the peaks. I stumbled out of my tent to see Alice also waking up slowly. As we made our morning oats and coffee, I wandered around the site again to see if I could find the marks the bear had left, but instead, I noticed something odd. The small notebook was open. I swear that I had put it back where I had found it, closed in the back corner of the shelter, not open on the floor. Hey Alice, were you checking out this camp log last night? Nah, I passed out, man. It's not like there's anything to read in it anyways, he responded. You sure? I commented as I bent over to pick it up. The lone hiker's name was not so lonely anymore. At least 20 more names filled the pages. The lone travelers whose name was originally on the first page could now be found several pages deep within the notebook. I tossed it to Ellis, whose face instantly dropped the second his mind registered what was on the page. Great. Now I knew it wasn't just some dehydration delusion of the previous day. Dude, we must have been seeing things last night. There is no way we missed all of those names. How could we? Alice said. This is when I began to tell Alice about the slapping noise that I heard during the night. I received nothing other than instant denial. These sounds were not the result of some hooligans or backwards crazies harassing us. Alice was convinced. Rather sternly, he commented, It's a bear, Jack. It's just a bear. Let's go now. And well, go we did. Alice led us out of the site and on our way home, not 10 minutes later. A year has passed and I'm still not quite sure what happened during our night at the Dry River Shelter number 3. The memory of seeing a single name written on that front page of the notebook is so crisp in my mind. I couldn't have mistaken it. Could I have mistaken the noises I heard and the new additions to the book? Alice feels the same way about the whole scenario. What do you think? Could we just have been too dehydrated and delusional? Or were we not welcomed by the New Hampshire wilderness?